Hi there, welcome to today's webinar on Leeds Council's approach to financial wellbeing. I'm Lynn Sharp. I'm here with my colleague Sandra Sankey, and we'll be hearing from Alex Watson and Darren Crowe at Leeds Council. Please feel free to submit any questions throughout the webinar. We'll be taking the questions at the end, so just use the chat feature if you have any questions or if you have any issues with the sound, etc. So yeah, use the question tab or the chat tab. I'll pass you on to my colleague Sandra.
Thank you, Lynn. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sandra Sankey. I'm a project manager with the Improvement Service, and I've been working here on the Money Advice Outcomes project. That's 5 years now. So thank you for everyone that's joined us this afternoon in this webinar learning session. The webinar has actually been a targeted webinar, invitation only, just sent out to local authority representatives in Scotland. And I'm pleased to say that we have 10 councils represented today and double that in the number of actual participants. So before I hand over to our guest speakers from Leeds City Council, I'd just like to share a little bit of background information with you, and I've just put a couple of slides together. I realise that not all of you participating in the webinar session may be familiar with the work of this project. I know that all of you will probably be familiar with the work of the Improvement Service and the relationship that it has with Scottish councils and community planning partners, but this might be the first time that you're coming into contact with this project. So just a very quick introduction from myself. So the project that I've been working on was originally funded through the major funder was the UK Money Advice Service, which has just recently changed its name following a merge with the Pension Advisory Service and PensionWise, which formed the new single financial guidance body from the 1st of January. And I've just seen in the news yesterday that there's a new name for that, for the Money and Pensions Service. So the funding for this work, for our project, is also devolved to Scottish Government from the start of the year. So you'll see on the top of this first slide, I've actually mentioned that we have multiple work streams within the project, and that's changed over the course of the years as well. It was initially a 2-year research project. Now we have multiple, numerous publications that you can access via the link that I've put in these slides that you'll get afterwards to our project web pages, where you can find all the work that we're involved with. Today, I'm specifically talking to you just about one work stream, which we've been funded to do this year, and that will, is aiming to conclude by the end of the financial year. And that was a financial capability work stream. Now that covered many angles as well, but one particular focus of that was to look at having a focus with employers, and obviously our key stakeholder engagement has been with local authorities in Scotland. So the Money Advice Service at the time and the work of the UK Workplace Steering Group that sits under the UK Financial Capability Strategy had a focus on employer engagement last year, and that hence why we were asked to look at the local authority as an employer and what work was going on to support the financial well-being for employees in the workplace. So the aim is to have draft guidance sent round for you to have a look at this month and comment on. And we've been working with some local authorities already and engaging on different interventions within the workplace and trialling different interventions as well. You may be familiar with the themed week that took place in November last year under a new name called Talk Money Week, which encouraged, again, multiple organisations to get involved and have a conversation around money. There was a big drive for employers to get involved, and we had a number of local authorities that actually took that opportunity to really engage with employees during that week and kind of set the agenda for moving forward and changing a bit of a culture within the workplace around talking about money. So that is really, really positive to see. So the guidance and publication that we will produce will include any areas of good practice that we've managed to identify on our journey through this work. Not just in Scotland, but hence why we have Leeds City Council here today, and I'll talk to you about other approaches as well. In November last year, myself and Alison Barnes, who's the Scotland manager at the time for the Money Advice Service, we did engage with COSLA and HR representatives at the Employer Forum to present the business case around this work and why there was a great need to be investing in financial well-being. So hopefully we will you'll find this webinar session helpful today, because it came via a request from some of the representatives at the Stakeholder Forum to have some learning from elsewhere shared with key stakeholders through webinar. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. So I'm not going to go into too much information about the work that we do and from elsewhere just now. I'm just going to go to the next slide and highlight the definition of what we actually say is financial well-being, and also have included another slide as well, which was presented in the main presentation to the HR Employer Forum as well, pulling in some of the different evidence base of different research partners that have obviously highlighted a lot of work around employers, and I'm sure this is not the first time that you're probably seeing some of this information, but there's lots more evidence and a lot more recent evaluations coming out from other pieces of work which we can maybe pick up on later as well, that will be shared with you and help on this agenda going forward. So I've put my contact details in here, and they'll be shared with you at the end as well for anyone to get in touch following today's webinar. And what I'm going to do is we'll pass you over to Alex and Darren just now, and then I can come back in at the end and help answer any questions hopefully you may have as well. So thank you for listening to that short presentation, and I'll pass you on now. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, good afternoon everybody. I'm Alex Watson.
And I'm Darren Crowe.
So thank you. I'm just going to make sure you've got this on a slideshow, which hopefully you will have now. Yes, we're on slideshow. Okay, so I met Sandra, well, I've not actually met Sandra, but we've been talking over the phone for about 2 or 3 conversations, and I think we're very interested in what's happening in Scotland, but we're also very interested in just sort of widening networks and sharing experience. So we'll talk you through what we've done in Leeds, and hopefully, I hope actually some of it is stuff that you're familiar with and you're working on anyway, because it's probably the right things to do, but maybe we've done some things that are different, and maybe you'll have some different ideas so we can share some best practice really. So just to give you a bit of a background, again, I'm not quite sure what sort of authorities I'm talking to at the moment, but Leeds is a unitary council. We're based in West Yorkshire. Leeds is, I'm going to big up Leeds. Leeds is the capital of Yorkshire, and don't listen to anybody else. But we are the regional centre. We are a major financial centre. We've got quite a diverse economy. We've done reasonably well, I think, in dealing with some of the consequences of both austerity and, I guess, economic difficulties that have affected places. Some of the authorities around us haven't done so well. Darren, who used to work with Kirklees,
yeah, the neighbouring local authority, yeah.
Talk about perhaps the experience in Huddersfield and maybe Bradford, which contrasts a little bit with Leeds. We're a Labour-controlled council, and we've had a strong focus on keeping services in-house. So we've got around 14,500 staff. Schools in Leeds, a lot of them are now moving into academy status, but we still do a lot of the FM. So at least I think 5,000 of our staff we'd kind of categorise as either sort of low paid or on the fringes of living wage thresholds, really. And that's where our journey on this started, that we did some work across different authorities in West Yorkshire, which is how I got to know Darren as well before he came to work in Leeds. And the focus of that was really about sorting out a progression in terms of covering gaps in terms of in-work poverty and to basically to pay living wages. Now, as of today, the NJC Pay Award will bring local authorities absolutely up and ahead of the foundation living wage. So we're not going to talk too much about that. But when we did the work in the past, one of the things that we were really conscious of was just paying a living wage doesn't make life fairer, and you need to work on a lot of other things around benefits and training, on welfare. And I think treating everybody fairly, but treating everybody fairly through almost the lens of an impact assessment. So what does it mean for your lowest paid staff? And we found some things which actually weren't great, I think, in terms of access to training, in terms of access to services, access to information. And what we started to do was think a lot more about that, which led us to think about the benefits that we offered staff. But at the same time, that started to dovetail with, I guess, a refreshed view around well-being at work. And that's where we started to have a discussion about financial well-being as a key theme. And this is really where our staff started to give us feedback about things that our employee survey. Do you want to say a bit about what we got there?
Yeah, when we did the employee survey, we changed it a little bit last year. We asked questions really about issues outside of work rather than purely issues with your manager, purely issues in the workplace, etc., etc. And one of the things that came back was money. Money issues are a big concern outside of work for our employees, which was, it's obviously hard to hear when you see the results, but at the same time, it gives you a little bit of confidence because it allows you then to go and start the conversation, because this would have been a difficult conversation really to start in terms of our offline lower paid staff. Why are you talking to me like that? Why do you want to know? Why does HR want to talk to me about my financial situation? So it was fantastic in that respect that they came forward. We now can use that as a foundation really to start the conversation with them, because they already have started it with us, if you like. So we're now moving on to do some of the well-being work. Do you want to just carry on and talk about some of it? Yeah. But there's lots of things going on really, so I've got to be mindful I don't jump around here a little bit. Yeah, thank you. What we've started to do, I'll break it up into 4 categories really: signposting, education, resilience, and how that then we see in the workplace for benefits. In terms of signposting, we're doing a lot of work with the Money Advice Service. Ironically,
the retitled
service, wonderful acronym SIVGB. But what we're doing with Money Advice Service, and why we're working with the Money Advice Service, is because they were set up by the government, as you probably already know, to have a consistent advice on finances. And so instead of having lots of different types of information, is it good, and having to stay on top of it, it makes that life a little bit easier for us. The Money Advice Service provide all the information, we provide the links. They sit on our intranet now. One of the difficulties I'll go on to about that later on, though, the internet, the online and offline. They have a relationship with StepChange, who their headquarters are in Leeds. They set up debt management plans for people, our employees who are really in need of it. I mean, they do it for the general public as well, but we're working with them in terms of our employees. Credit unions, the pension, all this information on them. This formulates part of the education as well, really, because we don't just want to provide information or a link. We'd like to do a little bit more. We'd like to possibly set up workshops and not be afraid to talk about money in the workplace, which is a massive stigma at the moment. We'll probably see that in HR reflected as attendance management, stress, etc., etc. Because it's, as we've said, it's great that our employers have come forward, because it's a very difficult conversation to start off for either of us, really, as an employer or as an employee. So we're looking at education, Union Learn as well, where in terms of actual education, the real sense, we're looking at maybe changing some of the numeracy courses that we do to provide So the questions are a bit more structured on finances. If I take a loan out of 7% over 3 years as opposed to 9% over 2 years, what do I pay the most on, which one, etc., etc. Now, part of that probably would be to help them realise when they go to Bright House and payday lenders that 1,400, the reality of what 1497, as they like to call it in our world, it's 1,497% interest rate. So that, and that would like to start to see a better relationship between ourselves, our partners, and the employees, really, that we are actually helping them. The information we're providing is relevant to them, and we are listening to them. But it's also about preparing for them outside of work as well as inside, because whatever happens outside of work, people will tend to bring some of that into work with them. This as well, but the education, it needs Lyceon to resilience. Maybe hopefully we'd start to see a bit more resilience, create a bit more of that because of their education is starting to get a bit better. They're not afraid to just stick their head in the sand about it. They're prepared to either speak to ourselves, our colleagues, or their partners that who we signposted them to. And of course, once they start to get a little bit better, in a better situation, really, we can start looking at savings, the importance of savings, the importance of being part of being in a pension scheme. And hopefully we can start to see some of these benefits at working. Alex, would you like to kind of go on about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of this is about better marketing things that are actually kind of long established in organisations. So again, we talked about the pension membership. Sometimes that gets quite a light touch until auto enrolment comes along, and then we're learning about how do we deal with people that are pretty upset that you're taking money off them because they haven't got enough money to make ends meet. At the same time, trying to have a conversation about the benefits of the pension package.
We've actually changed the auto enrolment form because we asked, do you want to opt out? But we never asked why we opt out. And now there was a danger really of assuming that everyone just does it for financial reasons. So that's part of the work that we're doing here. We've now changed that opt out form, which asks specific questions about why people opt out, and that's changed for 600 employers as well across the country.
Mm-hmm. And then I think that point about the workplace benefits that are useful, that we'll come on and talk about it a little bit more in terms of what's available in the marketplace. But what we felt when we did our low pay charter and started looking at living wages was that the industry seemed to provide for sort of a present that someone that's got a reasonable amount of money might have for their 50th birthday in terms of going in a hot air balloon or driving around a racetrack. And what we wanted to shift it far more to was sort of everyday discounts, especially on shopping. You spent some time talking to staff. Do you want to say what you found from that?
Yeah, the way we approached our employee discount scheme, because I mean, just to give you a bit of, when I first started on this project, and I typed in workplace benefits, it came up with all shares in the company, private healthcare, Bupa, etc., etc. When I put low-paid employee benefits in front of that, it just took me straight through to working tax credits at the time. It shows a real shift in the word benefits when I type low paid in front of it. So it's a bit clear that we're going to have to do some of our own work really on what does an employee discount scheme look like for our lower paid workers. As Alex rightly said, it's mostly IT based. It's great if you want to have a fantastic meal in a Michelin-starred restaurant, but at the same time, we wouldn't achieve anything that we wanted it to achieve. So we went out and we did some focus groups across the region, actually, really, to determine and ask employees where would they like to see discounts. Now, going just to touch on some of our offline and not versus online, I must admit it was a bit sad to hear some of the responses because childcare came up, travel discounts came up, and now, as we all know, if you work for an authority long enough, those are things that we provided for quite a long time, really. Ever since I've been working for an authority, we provided those. So it shows there's a clear difference between the level of information you get if you sit at a laptop and the level of information you get if you don't have access to one. But going back to the focus groups, we engaged with them really, and we started to structure the procurement documentation around their basic needs, and and as Alex rightly says, not necessarily to save 90% off a Rolls Royce, which wasn't it wouldn't be any good to anyone. We started to look at how we could save money on shopping, clothing, the day-to-day items, utilities, various other household bills really, and household spend, to try and cut that cost down really.
So we'll come on and talk a little bit about how we've developed that journey, but I think it might just be worth just perhaps setting out some of the things that we're thinking about next really. So we're currently involved in a number of discussions with organisations that you may have heard of. So NABAR, and I just were quoted in Sandra's slides, they work very closely with it's called the People Management Association, which is, I'm not quite sure what its Scottish equivalent is, but they're a kind of sponsor of events, and we found that they offer what we believe is quite a good product, and one of the earliest sort of people perhaps to approach the public sector in terms of payroll deducted lending, especially around consolidation of credit card debt and dealing with, I guess, people that can't get the best financial deals. I don't like the word subprime, but it was definitely around that. It was about people with poor credit history. Since then, we've met at least two other organisations, one called Salary Finance and one called WageStream. And as part of the work that we're doing with Leeds Credit Union and the Money and Pensions Advice Survey, we are doing a survey again on that. I can show you a few details on that as well if people are interested. So I think what we're trying to do is sort of see what's the best for us in that sort of moving marketplace where kind of fintech organisations are coming in. They do see, I guess, salaried public sector workers as quite a good bet in terms of lending, and they can make attractive offers to people. What we are concerned, however, is that they can't necessarily cover everything. And as Darren, I think, has given you an indication, we've got a big issue about web versus face-to-face and the effectiveness of that for all of our staff. And again, when I talked about the lower paid sort of groups within Leeds, we're talking about 5,000 staff who not only work part-time but are very, very dispersed. It's not like there's some single depot or a couple of depots in the east and the west you can go to and find people. People are popping up all over the place, working very few hours, often having multiple jobs elsewhere. So actually finding the time to do that face-to-face as well as having the resources is a clear issue for us. But equally, the feedback we get when we are able to hold those events are really, really positive. So there's something about different types of communication that we need to think about and the cost of that. The other thing that I've called them social partners, and I'm not quite sure whether everyone will have a credit union, but if you haven't got a credit union, there's things that credit unions can do that are really, really good, which I don't think the marketplace can replicate. In Leeds, we've had a long-standing arrangement with a credit union that actually grew out of the workplace, but has since gone on and does a significant amount of kind of community lending, is closely associated with our social housing, not just council housing, but other groups in Leeds. Does lots of things around debt advice, and again, gets out into communities. So what we've found, and we'll feed this into the discussion really, because I think it's important to recognise it, that there's a real tension between what a credit union would seek and some of the other more fintech organisations. There's a concern that they're narrowing down the marketplace and there would be a competition. The credit union, I think quite rightly have said, if we lose all our good borrowers and good lenders, we'll be sort of squeezed into dealing with people which don't have such good credit histories, and we aren't able to offer as much lending. So there's a real tension, and I think the marketplace, when they come and talk to Leeds, they kind of understand the politics of that as well. So that's been quite helpful to kind of get that out in one place. And again, it's kind of been a bit of a stimulus to the credit union to think about its relationship with the council as well. So one of the things that we're currently working on, as well as the MAS survey, is the credit union are offering preferential loans to our staff, which are payroll deducted. And whilst you might be able to, depending on your financial status, be able to go and get a bank loan, we know that many of our staff won't be able to achieve that. So it's really useful to have the credit union to offer those rates. The other bit that's really, I think, not quite firing on all cylinders, but ought to be, is the role the trade unions can play, both in terms of a welfare role generally, but also around literacy and numeracy through the trade union learn movement. We are using it quite a lot to upskill people and to improve people's confidence. But I think one of the things that you quite often assume is that people can work out percentages, that they can work out what a weekly rate is or a monthly rate. There are definitely some skills barriers that I think exist, and then that probably leaves people vulnerable to making poor choices. And I've mentioned anchors here as well, which is another bit. We're using this phrase anchor institutions in Leeds, which is something that's borrowed from the United States. But I think our idea is that the large public sector organisations are both spenders and employers in a particular area. So that might be your university or your hospital typically, but it could include other organisations. It could include whether it's privatised or not, maybe the transport set up in your area. It's about them working more collaboratively to meet some social objectives. So again, part of our discussion will be with the NHS trusts in Leeds and other NHS bodies. What are you offering your staff, and are there similar things we could do? So we've been down that journey on the living wage stuff. I think we're now starting to think about it in terms of our financial approaches and how we support the staff. Do you want to say a little bit about the Wellbeing Week? And
yeah. So
you've got that?
I mean, I've mentioned a few times there about our local intranet and having various pages on there for money advice service, step change, credit union, etc., etc. Now, we also talked as well about web versus face-to-face. Now, part of that problem there will be we'd probably only hit around 60-odd% of our 70% of our employees. But a lot of our lower paid workers who are a bit more closer to the cliff edge, if you like, might not be able to access this information, be complete, as going back to the travel card and the childcare. You know, we've had that for a long time and they were unaware of this, even asking for it as a benefit they'd like to see. So we've got to be extremely mindful, really, that we can't just put these things out on the internet, as easy as that is, because of all the links and the wonderful information available on there. So we're looking at having a financial wellbeing week. It won't be in November, actually, but we're looking at maybe having this around May time. And what we're looking to do there is bring our internet pages to life. So going out there and having various events throughout the city where employees can attend, come out, maybe look at energy switching. But so we're trying to have a style and approach that makes saving, make money. I think people want to talk about where they say, well, I saved 300 quid on my energy bill, and get them talking about money rather than just go straight to the debt management stuff or anything like that. We're going to look at, like I say, bringing savings to life, maybe look at not going to work and buying 10 coffees a week or something like that, and so saved X amount of money, and try to bring a little bit of fun into it and what they did with the savings as well. So they understand the correlation between, well, I saved this, actually, I didn't have to borrow then, etc., etc. We're really in talks about that, what does that look like when we get there. But there's, like I say, various events going on around the city, mid-career financial planning, making people aware. Well, when do you want to retire? How do you make that possible rather than work until you're 68? And really getting the employees to get engaged with this as well. And then obviously we'd look at it and revisit it, see what we needed to do, and just have an annual event every year. So we don't just start something and then it just disappears slowly into the background. We want to just keep this thing going, get some momentum and carry on. There's also various other events that we've got as well. We've got good work events. As Alex will talk about that a little bit more about that in a minute. But we're looking to maybe do something with our money advice survey that's out there for the employees to fill in now through a pilot with the credit union. That's giving us some fantastic feedback, actually. So it's not just me and Alex saying this is what it's like to be our employees. It's great because our employees are actually telling us what it's like. And just to give you a bit of an interesting fact there, really, We've had around 600 responses so far, and it's only been out a couple of weeks. 50% of employees have said they've encountered money worries, and 20% of them have said it's affected them at work, which is going to be great as well, because like I said right at the very beginning, this can prompt us so we can respond to that rather than trying to prompt or poke our employees into having a discussion which they probably might want to have. This is a great platform because it allows us to start those conversations. I'll just pass you over to Alex now, talk a bit more about a few other events.
Yeah, so the Good Work event is something that we're working up with business in the community. We're a member of that, and again, it's another initiative, I guess, aimed at different businesses, but this is probably more the commercial sector than just the anchors. And it's really to get a dialogue going in Leeds and the West Yorkshire region beyond about what other things that employers could do. I actually think there is, possibly because of Brexit, some enlightened self-interest out there amongst some national companies anyway, and it's really how do we get some of that exposed and talked about in terms of things that people can do to support employees. So there's a number of things, and we'd want to position ourselves within that and talk about the financial well-being stuff within that. And then the final point here, I think, for us is around a return on investment, which kind of we get asked to do these things because they're good things to do, and we know that they're good things to do. We know it makes a difference, but I think if we're going to sustain this or develop it wider, we need to be a bit smarter with the numbers, and we need to sort of show the impact. So Sandra asked us to actually sort of say what is our action plan going forward. So we had a little chat, didn't we, before we started this. We think essentially that we are kind of in carry-on mode, and that we will continue to improve our partnerships and continue to improve the signpost. And we don't think, whilst there's a lot of work to be done in terms of awareness, we don't think this is something that you can hand over to managers to do. It's specialist stuff, and we would want that to happen. And again, it's not always because of relationship issues the thing that you would necessarily automatically go to talk to your management or your HR department about. I think critical for us is to get some investment in good communications, and that's not just exclusive to this topic. It's everything around having a dispersed workforce where you've got an online system versus an offline system, and that is a real issue for us that we want to crack both in this approach and in other things. We want to keep a close eye on the marketplace as well, because whilst I've mentioned NABAR and Salary Finance and WageStream, they have actually got some interesting products. So we had a presentation last week around whether or not there can be payroll advances rather than payroll lending, which sound quite interesting, but worryingly might create a dependency on people never actually getting paid or having to pay back what they've borrowed before they've actually been paid again. So we're not so sure about where that goes, and that might be something for people to think about. And then, as Darren said, we've got a staff survey coming up, which we will repeat shortly. And I think really from that we'll get a fix about, are the things we're doing getting anyone's attention? Are they making a difference? And also, I think perhaps with the changing climate, are people more prepared to talk about these things and raise them as issues? So I think that's really important. And then we would also link it into the survey results that we get from the Money Advice Service as well. So there's a number of things there that we would want to distill and try to use, I think, to sort of make it more of a coherent strategy rather than, there's a few things we can do and we had a few existing relationships and we're trying to sort of move it across. I think the other point that kind of is quite useful to note, and it might be that your organisation is in a similar position, is that this is not just being done exclusively in HR. We're working with kind of community people and people that deal with benefits administration and advice there. And I think one of the things that we've found is probably again about how you customise this, that there's some very good information out there, but sometimes it's just a little bit too detailed, or it's a little bit sort of too much around how do you deal with people that are, on the edges or actually destitute, really. So we don't think it's really our role to sort of signpost people to food banks necessarily, unless they are accessing it through some other agency in terms of our employment relationship. But at the same time, we do want to make sure people are aware of products that can support them. But again, as we said, it comes back to the sort of the signposting, the education, and that building capacity, and then finally, making sure that if we do have benefit packages, we design it around the staff and we use it to meet their needs rather than what is in a marketplace. So just to sort of sum up, they're the key things that we're looking at. So that's kind of us for now. Do we want to hand back to you, Sandra and Lynn?
Okay, is that us back? Yeah. Thank you. Thanks very much, Alex, and thank you, Darren. That was a really, really informative presentation slides that you've given us there. I found it thoroughly enjoyable, and I hope that the participants have got a lot out of it as well. I think I've really taken by, I think some of the key points that you mentioned about the online versus the people that are not online is a really, important point to make. And that's, thanks for sharing your approach around that. I think, from the employee survey, the evidence that you've got there and how you've reacted to that, I think, showcasing us the work that you've taken around that is just, it's fantastic approach. So going to be lots of useful learning. Hopefully we'll continue to learn from you. And I think the evaluation that was the Money Advice Services commissioned around the payroll deductions savings scheme with the credit union and all that work that's going on as well will be useful when that comes out, to learn from that too. So I think there's quite a few things I could go on about, but I want to give participants their chance to be asking some questions. So I'll see if Lynn has got anything that's coming in first before we move on.
Yeah, if you could just use the question function if you have any questions. So we have one at the moment that is for Alex and Darren. How did you phrase the questions about issues outside of work in your employee survey? Was this around what did they want to share that was impacting them outside of work?
It was done as an opportunity to allow staff to ask open-ended questions. So what was done was the responses that sort of identified money were collated, and I think there was 5 top things. So money was one, workloads was one, our appraisal system was criticised quite a lot, and people not having a voice was identified as well. So we are going to go back and ask the question slightly differently and sort of said, in our last survey, you raised these things. Do you see that there's been any improvement? So we didn't actually go in there and sort of ask it ourselves. It came up through the survey and the open-ended part of it.
However, the money advice survey that we're currently running now is purely based on finance. So I can share the links there so you can see how that's been structured. I can send that to you, Sandra, and you can distribute it maybe.
Please, thanks very much, Dan. That'd be very helpful. Got any more?
Yeah, are there any more questions?
Okay, while we're waiting for any some more questions to come in, I think you picked up, Alex, you mentioned earlier about the payroll advances, that you had a presentation on that last week. I think just to share with the participants that I'm going to be, there'll be another couple of webinar sessions coming up this month. I'm waiting on another authority coming back to me that's actually just started to, they've just contracted from the start of this year to offer these payroll advances to their employees, and are working with one of the other organisations to offer loans to their employees as well. So hopefully we'll have a bit of learning, coming out from other areas around that as well. And just to also mention, I think I had said earlier that there's the overarching UK financial capability strategy. There's a number of national steering groups in place, and there is a workplace steering group. There'll be some useful learning coming out from that group around the whole employer strategy going forward. But also just to let you know that the new Money and Pension Service have informed me today actually that there will be, it's not been marketed yet, but there will be a webinar on Tuesday, hopefully the 19th of March. If you want to maybe make a note of this just now, if you're interested in getting involved, it's between 11 to 12. And that will be provided from a company called Hayes around their financial wellbeing in the workplace approach. But I will definitely get the links out to you to two further webinars this month. And don't worry if you don't get the chance to participate. We usually these will be recorded and you'll be able to download afterwards. But I think we've got more questions, so I'm going to pass over now to Lynn.
Yeah. So, question for Darren and Alex again. So they're interested in. You were saying around the links of financial worries and resilience/mental health. Have Leeds seen any improvement in sickness absence rates since the inception of this approach?
We've seen a deterioration in our attendance. That we've gone from, we've probably been, over the last 16 months, we've been creeping up by nearly a day more. So our absence rate is 9.89, I think it is, at the last month. And this is, again, it links into this whole wellbeing debate, because I think we've got a kind of a mindset that if we hadn't done anything, it would have been a lot worse, because times are getting tough for people, and the stresses that people face in terms of modern life, modern work aren't working out. But at the same time, I think I'm personally much more minded to try and look at what we need to do to turn around that, and whether this is making a difference. So I mean, sadly, the two things don't correlate at the moment, but it is a key and critical indicator for us that at least a third of our sickness is due to stress and mental health issues, and we know that is going to be driven by money. And we know as well, when people are presenting at work, they're probably going to be distracted because of money issues. So we need to build the correlation up, and hopefully we can show a turnaround.
Yeah, one of the things that we are actually looking at the moment is to once the conversations start within the workplace, potentially around finances, where our employees are starting to see that the work that we're doing and are a bit more confident in having the conversation, certainly making people aware of it. What we'll be looking at maybe is looking at special leave. So if people have to do, employees have to do certain things at certain times, rather than ringing sick because they're too intimidated to have, or too embarrassed, if you like, to have the conversation, they can start to have the conversation. We may look at them and say, okay, well, look, take a couple of hours off this afternoon, go and do what you need to do, and hopefully that kind of approach will start to see an impact on the attendance. For example, we did a pro forma for universal credit when that was being introduced, so employees could just fill the form in, and the people who are our colleagues who work in the benefits service can do the checks and answer the questions, queries that they may have, rather than taking the time off or going into town on a Saturday or Friday or whatever it is, the day off. It was done for them, and then the conversation just happened naturally. They were contacted, and that was all completely anonymized, if you like, in terms of I didn't know who it was. It went into an envelope, it got passed over. So we're looking at various things like that to maybe improve it as well, just giving an hour here or a couple of hours there to do what they need to do, and rather just get more stressed and have a bigger impact on attendance than it probably should have done in the first place.
That's great, thanks. Would you be able to share your fuller findings on employee discounts for the lower paid and what you now offer?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course we can. Yeah, I'll have to see how that will work, because at the moment it's just a big website. But I should be able to produce some of our findings and what we did in response to that.
Great, thanks. So The next question is, are you looking to offer one-to-one personal professional financial advice to colleagues or targeted groups of employees like those facing redundancy?
I think we would like, that would be an ambition for us. I think we've
looked at a mid-career finance. Yeah, I'll let you do the redundancy bit. We've looked at mid-career financial planning courses, which are quite similar to the pre-retirement courses that come on, but like I say, a bit obvious. But the mid-career. So, how if Darren wants to retire at 60, what would Darren need to be doing to be able to make that an achievement? So, silly little things like being aware of when your mortgage runs out. Now, when we piloted that, it was a bit aimed at the professionals amongst us all. So what we're doing now is talking to them and trying to create something that's a bit more aimed towards the lower paid. So it's not just necessarily aimed at the higher paid professionals, if you like. And Alex, now redundancy.
Yeah, I mean redundancy. I mean, I'll touch wood and say, I think I've mentioned at the beginning, we haven't had that much redundancy in Leeds over the period of austerity that we've managed to redeploy staff into other roles to retrain them. We've had an awful lot of, I guess, vacancy control to get us there, and I think as well the process of letting people leave on early retirement has been significant. But having said all of that, I still think that that's created some of the pressures in the organisation around workloads, which probably affect people as well. So, you know, it's not been a perfect solution, but, you know, I think if we did need to provide more advice around redundancies, we would. The only other point I'd make that I think Darren sort of alluded to is that I think the sort of the market in terms of offering financial advice and independent financial advice to people, it is definitely sort of organised around kind of offering products to people that are likely to buy them. And almost the language isn't great. It assumes everybody lives in a house that they're about to own, that they may have children at university, that they're a heterosexual couple or whatever. It doesn't really reflect, I think, the reality of many of our staff who you know, won't have those opportunities perhaps at that stage in their life. And I think we need to sort of have a bit more honesty about how we do it. And again, as I felt the language wasn't great when I recently went on a course with Darren, we thought it was a little bit sort of old-fashioned. So that's another one to think about.
Yeah, I mean, we have going back to the Money Advice Service and their intranet page. I mean, they have got various products on their basic bank accounts, things. I mean, it's things like that that we'll be looking to improve within that our group of workers who are low paid offline. We'd start to look at that, having those types of conversations. I mean, credit rating, for example, how to improve the credit rating, how to be able to get a washing machine from Curry's at 8% rather than going to Bright House and getting one for 1,500%. That's where we'd be looking at using the different types of language. I mean, and a bit more real life settings as well, I think, because like Alex says, you've got to be mindful that they come in with a very corporate product, which does always need tweaking for it to be able. Otherwise, you just have a two-tier system, really. You've got those that it makes sense to, those that it doesn't, and that's the very thing that we're trying to avoid.
That's great, thanks. We've got 2 more questions. So the first one is about Universal Credit Awards. So have Leeds Council done anything around advising staff on how pay can affect Universal Credit Awards for employees? For example, recent pay award resulting in back payments will mean some employees' Universal Credit Awards will be reduced or even stopped. The same can happen if there are 2 4-weekly pays in a monthly Universal Credit Assessment period.
Yeah, we provided a lot of information. There were short videos that were available, and I know we talk a lot about offline and online, but we are now discovering services have created WhatsApp groups, Facebook pages, electronic newsletters that get sent out to the mobile phones. So we provided a lot of information on there. I mean, universal credit is one of them things that is extremely difficult to start the conversation. For example, the pro forma that I just mentioned about, where it's that word where their benefits were checked, if you like, but we were checking to making sure they were getting everything they were entitled to. Now, of course, there was a bit of cynicism about the word check. They automatically thought, "Oh, I think what do you mean checking?" So it was difficult to have the face-to-face types of conversations. The best we could do really was to signpost and provide as much information as possible and as many channels as possible, particularly obviously to our offline lower pay guys. And yeah, rather than doing anything specifically face-to-face.
Yeah, I was going to say, we through working with our benefits colleagues, we're very aware of the implications of fluctuating earnings. I think at this point we haven't found anyone that is actually in difficult circumstances as a result of that, but we are aware that there will be one-off pieces of work that people won't be able to replicate, and as their earnings go up, their benefits will go down, and that kind of being able to stretch monthly pay that fluctuates is going to be a real problem. But I suppose I'm waiting to see where those problems are, and if we can smooth out the pay, we'd have a look at it. But at the moment, we're not so sure how much that's happening. But yeah, I did take the point about if there was a backdated pay award, that could have quite significant implications for people. So that's a helpful one for us to think about.
Yeah.
That's great, thank you. So the last question is, have you done any work around the increased state pension age / state pension benefits and the impact of that on employees and their well-being?
No, I think we're aware of it. I mean, we're trying to get it into a discussion about pensions. We're also actually, I don't know if anyone's interested in having the discussion elsewhere, but we don't feel we've got the resources or influence to deal with it. But we think that we're almost, the way the local government pension scheme works, it's a bit perverse for the very low paid, that you can end up in a situation where if you combine the value of your state pension and your local government pension, by the time you get to 68, you're probably going to be earning more money or have more income than you had when you were in employment, and that could even be full-time employment. So there's something about, I think, a bit of pension reform. But yeah, we are, one of our key selling points that we need to keep marketing is that people do need to start to expect to work for longer, and that's sort of another piece of work that we're both working on, which is sort of strategies around employment of older workers as well. So it's probably going to feature a little bit more there than necessarily around the benefits, but we are definitely thinking, what's it going to be like in the future when people potentially do live to 100, and the sort of model of school, work, retire is no longer going to be the case, and we need to think about different approaches that will help people bridge gaps between perhaps ending one career and starting another career, and then being able to access a state pension.
Okay, thanks very much, Alex and Dan. I think that is us finished then with our list of questions for today. I would just like to thank you both very much for giving us your time and sharing your learning, with us, some of those challenges as well that you've had to deal with, and how you've managed to overcome them, and your plans, for driving this agenda forward in your workplace. Hopefully we'll keep in touch. You've given us lots of things to consider, and the work that we want to look at here in Scotland as well. And what I would say is thanks to all the participants for joining in and asking all your questions. It's been really, really useful for everyone. And thanks for Lynn for facilitating the webinar software. What we'll do now is we will, so we should have a recording of the webinar. We can get that out to you, And also we will have a few questions at the end of this webinar. You'll get a link to all the participants asking for some feedback, but also, you know, within those, we'd like you to comment on some of the questions and things that we're looking for. If there's any further questions that you have in relation to anything that you've heard today that you want to ask a bit more about, want anything clarified a little bit, feel free to just put your comments into the feedback in the survey, and I'll get back in touch with you. I'm sure Alex and Darren will be happy to, you know, answer any further questions following today as well. I've given you my contact details, so feel free if you want to email or give me a call as well, and hopefully I will be in touch, you know, with you further after today, and I will make sure that I get the links for the other upcoming webinars out to you all as well. So just like to bring the webinar to a close and thank you all very much for your time. Maybe just before I do that, just bring in Alex and Darren just to see if there's anything that you want to finish off with before we say goodbye.
Helpful. Sorry, thank you for listening. We hope it was helpful for you all.
No, absolutely. And finally, I think our contact details are on the last slide, so please feel free to contact us if you have anything or you'd like to talk about anything or share good practice or anything like that based on this, on what you've heard today. Thank you very much.
And bye-bye. Have a good day.